straight into it. If you accept the McCann's guilt, you must also accept a chain of improbable choices, deliberate concealment, coordinated deception, and 17 years of silence from friends, family, and witnesses that runs counter to what we know about human behavior. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell to get first-hand updates as this story develops. To believe that Kate and Jerry McCann deliberately hit a fatal act requires imagining a long, tightly woven conspiracy. It imagines parents arranging for a child's body to be concealed or destroyed, coordinating a network of close friends to tell a single consistent story, enduring intense police scrutiny and hostile media attention, without a single credible leak, and maintaining that secrecy for nearly 2 decades. That is not an argument based on sympathy. It is an argument from the ordinary mechanics of human behavior. Secrets of that magnitude typically unravel. People grow tired, resentful, frightened, or conscience-stricken. Over years, there are usually slips, recantations, or at least a single credible tip. What the public record shows instead is a patchwork of competing timelines, shifting witness recollections, contested scent alerts, and a very public, sustained campaign by the parents to find their daughter. Those facts complicate any neat criminal conspiracy narrative. Human memory is fallible and easily influenced, but it also tends to produce leaks when individuals are pressed together by shared stress and long-term consequences. Over 17 years, a coordinated silence on a secret that dramatic is statistically unlikely. A truly convincing case of parental guilt would therefore need physical evidence of a kind that is hard to disguise. Clear and uncontested DNA, blood evidence with an unbroken chain of custody, or a reliably time-stamped record directly linking the child's remains to a specific concealment action. That kind of corroboration is what separates plausible suspicion from near certainty. In the McCann case, the evidentiary record does not contain such unequivocal proof. When forensic testing is examined closely, the picture becomes more ambiguous. Some laboratory analyses cited in discussion of the case involve low copy number DNA samples or complex mixtures that forensic experts described as difficult to interpret confidently. In plain terms, samples taken and analyzed did not yield a straightforward, unambiguous match that would definitively place Madeline's biological material in a way that supports a parental concealment theory. Complex DNA mixtures can arise in many contexts and are inherently challenging to attribute to a single individual without high degrees of certainty. That technical difficulty matters a great deal in a case where other evidence is sparse. Without a clear forensic link, theories must stand on less reliable foundations such as recollection, scent detection, or circumstantial interpretation. Cadaver dogs became a prominent element in the public conversation early on. These dogs found scent signals that investigators interpreted as alerts in several locations, including the Holiday apartment and, according to some accounts, in a Harer car. To people unfamiliar with forensic nuance, a dog alert can feel decisive and dramatic, but dogs detect scent signatures, not DNA, and their alerts require independent physical corroboration to be treated as proof. Dogs can point investigators toward places that merit closer scrutiny, but they cannot by themselves establish guilt. In a number of the instances often cited, the laboratory follow-up either returned complex results that were difficult to interpret or did not produce the clear physical confirmation that would be needed to convert an investigative lead into conclusive evidence. In many legal systems, canine alerts are investigative tools rather than courtroom proof, and in this case they heighten suspicion without closing evidentiary gaps. Another central feature that fuels speculation is the behavior and testimony of the group known as the Top of Seven, the friends dining together the evening Madeline disappeared. They were close to the events, and their accounts are crucial in reconstructing timelines. Who checked on the children, which doors were used, and when people moved between apartments. However, their statements contain inconsistencies, small differences in time estimates, contrasting descriptions of door usage, and differing recollections about who saw or heard what contribute to a muddled chronology that is unsurprising from a memory perspective but significant in practical terms. When minutes matter, a 5 or 10-minute discrepancy can shift which scenarios seem plausible. The notion that 7 people could maintain a flawless, coordinated lie for years is hard to square with normal human behavior. People argue that shared social pressure, conversation, and the desire to protect one another can produce aligned narratives. But social reinforcement also tends to create pressure points where memories diverge or someone's retelling slips. That combination, apparent sameness in some phrases and detailed contradiction in other facts, is precisely what investigators reported and what has made the top of 7 accounts both central and controversial. Where physical records like CCTV or phone metadata are absent or incomplete, the investigation becomes heavily dependent on fallible human recollection, and that dependence invites alternative interpretations. This case unfolded in a highly public environment, a tourist resort where neighbors, staff, and other holiday makers move through the same spaces, where local police and later international media descended quickly, and when McCann's himself became a prominent public presence as they campaigned, fundraised, and appealed for information. That level of exposure complicates any scenario that presumes long-term concealment. Concealing a body or hiding a major secret in a community under sustained attention increases the likelihood that someone uninvolved will notice, a maintenance worker will discover something during renovations, or a tip will eventually surface. The fact that the family was actively campaigning and visible in the months and years after the disappearance further reduces the plausibility a secret conceal a home or nearby without detection. Skeptics might reply that public campaigning can be staged or that it could be used to deflect suspicion. But that argument runs into a practical problem. Extensive public activity increases, rather than reduces, the number of potential observers and the probability of inadvertent disclosure. If concealment were the objective, seeking media attention and public engagement would be counterproductive. Observers who defend the parents' innocence point to their sustained public efforts to find Madeline, appeals, interviews, private searches, and the establishment of a fund, as behavior consistent with trying to recover a missing child rather than hiding a crime. None of these actions are definitive proof of innocence, of course, but together they complicate a simplistic narrative of parental culpability. For investigators, cooperation isn't just a public posture. It's access to records, to time-stamped statements, and to places and items that could corroborate or contradict key points in a reconstruction. Public records also introduce another layer of complexity. Reports indicate that Harer has past legal issues and has used multiple names in certain documents. Those are the kind of details that, when accurate, complicate a public perception and invite deeper questions about identity, motive, and history. Importantly, such records are also subject to misinterpretation. Name variations can reflect marriage, divorce, clerical errors, or legitimate name changes. Still, investigators follow these threads because they may speak to mobility, associations, and potential reasons someone might tell different versions of events at different times. Then there's a wider family context that cannot be ignored. Harrier's daughter, Rosemary Rose Bly, reportedly vanished years earlier under circumstances that have never been fully explained. 2 disappearances in the same extended family, 12 years apart, naturally invite scrutiny from the public and from investigators looking for patterns. Patterns are not proof. They are prompts. They tell detectives where to look harder. Share acquaintances, geographic overlaps, family dynamics, or occurring risk factors. But patterns can also mislead when coincidence is mistaken for causation. The prudent path for officials is to examine overlaps rigorously, while resisting the rush to link narratives that may be unrelated. What all of this adds up to is a very human and very practical problem investigators must solve. How to weigh highly similar family accounts in a case with almost no physical trail. The options, in roughly ascending order of intervention, are to 1. Re-interview witnesses with a fresh, neutral interviewer to see if accounts remain identical when not prompted. 2. Collect and verify any and all objective records, ER logs, phone metadata, social media timestamps that can anchor statements. And 3. Test the provenance of common phrasing by determining whether the family viewed or discussed any media, videos, or posts that could have introduced shared language. Investigators also face a public relations triangle. They must protect the integrity of the inquiry, avoid tipping their hand about lines of questioning, and maintain public confidence that all valid leads are being pursued. In cases with few physical clues, public faith can crumble quickly if authorities are perceived as opaque or dismissive. Conversely, too much public disclosure can taint witness memory and permit pre-trial narratives to form that complicate legal action later. For the public watching closely, online forums, social feeds, and local coffee shops, the duplicative narrative by two family members has been fuel for furious debate. Some readers and viewers insist the matching details are proof of collusion. Why would two relatives rehearse the same odd specifics unless they were protecting something? Others argue that trauma compresses memory into scripts and that the family's repeated phrasing is a coping mechanism, a way to tell the story in a stable, repeatable form. The truth could be more banal. Shared conversations in the immediate aftermath created a verbal script that both women later leaned on. Or it could be more consequential. Either intentional obfuscation or a strange, coincidental alignment. What should a responsible viewer take away from all of this? Several practical points matter. First, absence of physical evidence does not equal absence of crime. Investigations are often built on human testimony. When the physical trail is cold, that is normal. But testimony must be tested, especially when it becomes the primary scaffold of the case. Second, similarities in accounts should trigger procedures, not headlines. Detectives should re-interview with neutral questions, verify records, and use phone and financial data to anchor timelines. Third, public speculation, while emotionally understandable, can be harmful. It can discourage witnesses from coming forward, contaminate memory, and pressure investigators into premature disclosures. Fourth, transparency matters in measured doses. Authorities should communicate what they can to maintain credibility. That means clarify whether key records like ER logs have been checked and what remains outstanding. Finally, the human element is central. Whether the repeating narrative stem from shared trauma, coaching, or something criminal, the people involved are real and the stakes are photographic. A missing child's family, a community's trust, and the long arc of justice. As the story unfolds, what matters most is verifiable evidence. If ER records, phone metadata, or independent witnesses confirm the family's timing and observations, then the identical details become corroboration rather than curiosity. If those records conflict with the accounts, investigators will have a very different set of lines to follow. For now, the public must hold two truths at once. The worry that identical storytelling can be suspicious, and the equally important fact that matching details do not automatically equal guilt. This is why professional, methodical re-examination of every record and every statement is the only reliable path to resolution. In the cases of Summer, official statements have consistently warned against assuming a direct link. Investigators emphasize that family relation alone does not equal causation. People travel, move, and have tragedies that are painful but unrelated. Still, the coincidence is striking. A woman gone without trace, and a decade later, a child from the same family also gone without trace. The emotional logic of such a sequence is powerful. It pushes audiences toward narratives that human beings use to make sense of chaos. That psychological pull can be helpful when it reveals overlooked connections, and harmful when it replaces methodical inquiry with speculation. Social media has been a major actor across both stories. Platforms amplified tips and kept attention on missing person searches in ways previous generations did not experience. For Rose, online chatter and amateur sleuthing followed early leads and revived interest years after fact. For Summer, social media exploded into a full-blown ecosystem of theories and crowdsourced efforts. Timelines reconstructed from clips, maps overlaid with possible routes, and call-outs to anyone who might have passed through certain roads on specific days. That collective attention has benefits. It can produce witnesses who remember something when they see a renewed video or map. It can surface new tips from people who were previously silent, and it can create pressure for authorities to maintain investigative momentum. Equally, it carries costs. The spread of misinformation, harassment of family members, false confessions, and the emotional toll of renewed speculation on those closest to the missing. Comparing Rose's and Summer's timelines and context, side by side, might reveal patterns that were invisible when each case was examined in isolation. For example, were there shared locations visited by family members, similar timelines of conflict, or overlapping social contacts? Did either case involve individuals who had access to remote properties or who displayed consistent patterns of movement across state lines? These are precisely the sorts of questions that seasoned investigators return to time and again. Investigators will also revisit mundane-seeming records with heightened scrutiny. DMV entries, rental logs, cell phone tower pings, surveillance at retail locations, and even cemetery records. In missing person work, a mundane transaction sometimes contains a latent clue that ties a timeline together. At the same time, caution is essential. The human brain is excellent at pattern matching. It can also coil up around false patterns that feel real but are coincidental. Investigative rigor demands testing every apparent link against objective records. That means law enforcement must weigh the cost of following unverified leads against the potential payoff. It also means being transparent about what is confirmed and what remains conjecture. A difficult balance when public pressure demands answers. What can we learn from this unsettling pairing of cases? First, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. A missing person case with no physical trace is not a sign that nothing happened. It is a sign that something happened outside the range of immediate detection. Second, family context matters in practical terms. Marital tension, prior injuries, or known disputes are lines of inquiry that must be pursued, but they require corroboration. Third, social media is neither villain nor savior. It is a tool that can accelerate both help and harm, depending on how it is used. Finally, comparative analysis, placing cases next to one another, can reveal testable hypotheses that single-case inquiry may miss. If you have verifiable information about either Rose Bly or Summer Wells, a time-stamped photo, a specific vehicle description tied to a date and place, CCTV footage, or a first-hand observation, contact the appropriate law enforcement agency immediately. For Summer Wells, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and local Hawkins County authorities are the official channels. For Rose Bly, local Wisconsin or state police handling her case should be contacted. Precise, corroborated tips are invaluable. Dates, times, license plates, and photographs with metadata are the kind of evidence that can convert rumor into proof. In the end, these cases are both about people and about systems. They expose the limits of search and forensics when evidence is absent, the emotional strain on families and communities, and the ways public attention can both sustain and complicate an inquiry. They remind us that unresolved disappearances leave long, raw scars in the lives around them. They also remind us of a basic fact of investigative life. Sometimes the smallest, most ordinary detail, a receipt, a bus pass, a neighbor's memory, becomes a hinge that opens a case. Two relatives, 12 years apart, vanish in silence. That silence has shaped how investigators proceed, how communities respond, and how the public imagines explanations. Side by side, Rose Bly's and Summer Wells' disappearances are a call to careful, methodical work that resists easy conclusions while remaining hungry for answers. The search continues, and every verifiable piece of information matters. We'll keep going. There's more to unpack, and this next stretch matters because it moves from what we already know into what can still be done. For the 5 minutes that follow, I'll lay out concrete investigative steps, explain the kind of forensic work that could make a difference, and offer clear guidance on how the public can meaningfully help without hurting the case. First, the practical forensic options investigators still have on the table. When physical evidence is scarce, teams often turn to tools and techniques designed to extract the smallest signals from noisy environments. Ground-penetrating radar, GPR, can be used to detect disturbed soil and hidden voids beneath the surface. It's the kind of technology that, when combined with careful mapping of the cemetery or any targeted site, can suggest where to dig without disturbing graves at random. GPR is not definitive on its own. It gives shapes and anomalies that must be interpreted, but in cases like these it's invaluable because it narrows large areas down to specific, testable spots. Cadaver dogs are another specialist resource. Trained properly, they can detect human remains buried long ago or hidden from sight. Their alerts don't replace lab confirmation, but they are a strong indicator that leads to excavation or forensic sampling. Forensic archaeologists and anthropologists then step in when a possible site is identified. They excavate carefully, document layers of soil, and collect any bone or material evidence with strict chain of custody procedures so that anything found is admissible in court. Summer Wells deserves answers, not conjecture. The matching accounts of Candus Bly and Candus Harer have rightly focused attention because there is no alternative trail to follow. But attention should be disciplined, evidence-focused, and careful. If you have verifiable information, timestamps, photos with metadata, phone records, first-hand recollections with precise dates and times, contact the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation or local authorities. Tip lines and official channels are the way to get usable information into the case file. This story will be followed closely, and when new, verifiable facts are released, they will change how the public understands a family narrative and the investigation. Until then, the best path forward is steady. Test claims, verify records, protect the investigative process, and keep the focus on what can be proved rather than on what is merely suspected.